Okay, our verse today comes from Mark 7:24-30. From there he set out and went away to the region of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know he was there. Yet he could not escape notice, but a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit immediately heard about him, and she came and bowed down at his feet. Now the woman was a Gentile of Syrophoenician origin. She begged him to cast the demon out of her daughter. He said to her, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." But she answered him, "Sir, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." Then he said to her, "For saying that, you may go. The demon has left your daughter." So she went home and found the child lying on the bed and the demon gone. Again, that was Mark chapter 7, verses 24-30.
Thank you. All right, so this morning, thank you, Shauna, for reading our scripture for today. This morning, I want to talk just for a few moments, and it really is going to be a few moments from the topic, at your best. At your best. Days ago, I got really irritated over pizza. Now, the problem wasn't the pizza. The problem was that I was tired. It had been a very busy and long work week. And I'm not sure if Shauna ever realized that I was irritated that day, but I felt like I was being short. I felt some agitation going on inside of me. But the bad thing was, if I continued to be irritated, if I continued to act agitated, that was not going to end in a good place, because really I was the one that asked for the pizza. I wanted the pizza, but something in me just would not let me be calm. But I managed to keep my words under control. I tried not to show my irritation. And eventually I realized that my irritation, my agitation was misplaced. You know, there are many people at the edge of irritation these days. The days are getting shorter. We're realizing we're at the end of the summer. It's Labor Day weekend, so we realize that that's it. Now we're going into fall and things start to head towards winter, where the days get shorter and the days get colder. COVID-19 is again the first story we see on the news. And work, for some reason, so many people who are working are feeling more stressed these days and feeling down and feeling the blues these days. General well-being seems to be slipping away from some of us. Our text today shows what can happen when you're tired and when you're in need of self-care. The text comes out of the book of Mark. It was written for an audience of new Christians, or as they were called, followers of the way, who were living in a time of being considered outsiders, being considered the other, being the ones who were not understood in the community because of their different beliefs. They were not only verbally abused, but some of them were actually physically and politically persecuted. But the author was trying to get across a message to say to these people to stand firm in what you believe, to stand firm in what you want. In most Bibles, there's a heading over this passage that says, the Syrophoenician woman's faith. But as I reread the text and read what some biblical scholars have said about this passage, I wonder if that really is the main or the only message in this text. There are other points in the passage that people brush over, and they maybe brush over it because there are aspects that people don't want to consider when it comes to their understanding of Jesus. But there is some value in reminding ourselves that Jesus was a human being who had the same emotions that we all go through. It's a passage that many of us find unsettling when we first read it, because we're used to those stories about Jesus talking about being loving to each other. Some of us, even me, have my little Bible where have a picture of a Jesus holding a lamb. You know, Jesus is this peaceful, loving, always positive power in the world. Most of us imagine that he was kind and thoughtful with no unkind words to speak, except for when he was speaking against the religious leadership and trying to protect other people, where he was calling the leadership hypocrites. But here is this passage where he responds to a woman's plea for help, not with the usual healing self, not with the usual embracing words, but he responds with an abrupt, racist response. Yes, I said Jesus had a racist response. He had just finished facing the Pharisees regarding his disciples not following all of the Jewish purity laws. Then he taught the crowd that it's not what goes into the body that defiles, but what comes out. And he was speaking about adhering to tradition rather than addressing the needs of the people. We're used to Jesus saying things like that. But after doing all of that, after fussing with the religious leaders, after speaking with the crowd, he was probably tired and in need of some self-care. In that state, when the woman approached him asking for one more thing, and she wasn't even a Jew, Jesus came back with a very offensive response. There's no way around that. Jesus gave a racist, ethnically insensitive reply. He said to her, "Let the children be fed first, for it's not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." In this reply, the allusion to children was really, he was talking about the Jews. And whereas the dogs he was referring to were the non-Jews. Wow, that's not the Jesus we know. That's not the Jesus we love. That's not the Jesus we talk about usually. But this was a Jesus who was in need of some self-care. How many times have we been brash in our statements? How many times have we been mean with something that we really didn't mean because we were out of sorts, because we were tired, because we were hungry, because we were at the end of our rope? I was reading something by Thomas Merton, and he said, "He who attempts to act and do things for others or for the world without deepening his own self-understanding, freedom, integrity, and capacity to love will not have anything to give others. He will communicate to them nothing but the contagion of his own obsessions, his aggressiveness, his ego-centered ambition, his disillusions about ends and means, his doctrinaire prejudices and ideas." It's not in the text, but I believe arrested Jesus, a centered Jesus, would have had the kind of reply we're used to hearing from him. We know that although he never preached in a Gentile community, Jesus was not really that detached from caring for non-Jewish people. Earlier in the chapter, he had already healed a non-Jew who was said to be possessed by a demon. But like Jesus, many of us are just like Jesus. We are in need of self-care. Even in 2021, we have a divided nation, which became even worse while we were all living under this blanket of COVID-19. The vaxxers are arguing with the non-vaxxers. The mask folks are arguing with those who embrace an argument that masks that protect life and protect health somehow violate rights. Crime statistics are up in most large cities. I think that what we need, I think all of us need a time out. That's what we do to children when we get out of sorts. We tell them to go somewhere and sit down and take some time to think, be with themselves, think, and come back when they're calm and ready to cooperate. I think we're all in the need of self-care. I was impressed by Naomi Osaka, Osaka, who said after trying to defend the championship at the US Open, but then losing her match this year, in a post-match interview, she said, "Recently when I win, I don't feel happy. I only feel relief. When I lose, I feel very sad." She said she needs a break and she doesn't know when she's going to play again, but she's going to take some time to care for herself and care for her mental health. It was Audre Lorde who said, "Self-care is not self-indulgence, it's self-preservation." But then we may ask, self-care, well, how do we do that? Because we don't do it enough, so some of us don't even know how to do it. I've got some suggestions. Number one, we could spend some time in solitude. Take some time even without our phones being on. I know that sounds like blasphemy, but we can exist without our phones being on for a period of time. Thomas Merton, once again, he said, "Many of us are so involved in a busy life that we have no time to focus inward. As a result, we lose our moorings and we drift away from a spiritual center and we become overwhelmed and lost." We need, my friends, to take some time for solitude. Number two, we can exercise regularly. You don't have to have any fancy equipment. All we have to do sometimes is just go for a walk. The CDC suggests that we target walking 7,000 steps a day. But truthfully, any amount of activity beyond what we're doing right now will benefit our health. The next thing we can do is eat right. Some of us just put anything in our body without thinking about what it's doing to the inside of our body. And when our inside doesn't feel right, oftentimes our outside doesn't show up right. We can learn to say no. It's important to learn to say no to others so we can say yes to ourselves. And we could take a break. We don't have to go on some long vacation. Long vacations aren't safe actually these days, but we could take a long weekend somewhere, or we can go for a hike, or we can just go have a picnic somewhere. Just take a break. We could get a pet. I'm partial to dogs because I know dogs, except for maybe my little dog, but generally dogs reduce stress and anxiety, and they can even lower your blood pressure. Or we can get organized, get a calendar, unclutter your space. Just get your life in order, because clutter and disorganization can make us crazy. I don't know about you, but it makes me crazy if I see a mess, or makes me crazy if I can't remember where I'm supposed to be or what I'm supposed to be doing. Get a calendar, unclutter your space. And finally, schedule time for self-care. And don't let anybody take that time away from you. We want to be able to be our best self. We want to offer our family our best self. We'll do better at work if we bring our best self to the table. We'll be more creative when we're being our best self. This is a message that gets lost in the interpretation of the text, because I think people don't want to admit that Jesus was unkind or out and out rude to a person that was in need. We don't want to think of ourselves that way either, but if we're honest, we're that way sometimes. Self-care is not the only message that gets lost in this text. Knowing when to give in is also important. I've always been impressed by this Syrophoenician woman's response to Jesus. She didn't get stuck in, he called me out my name. He called me a dog. No, she came back with a reply that even Jesus could not ignore. She said, "Sir, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." See, she was focused. Her daughter was sick, and that was more important than any indignation that she may have felt. I wish I could think so quickly. My wife can do that. I can't do that. But I can't quickly come up with a rebuttal to somebody's argument. Not right off the top of my head. Give me a week, maybe I'll come back to you, but not quickly. I would like to be able to come up with purposeful words right when they're necessary. I read someone said, to conquer frustration, one must remain intensely focused on the outcome, not the obstacle. Even Abraham Lincoln said, you can have anything you want if you want it badly enough. You can be anything you want to be, do anything you set out to accomplish, if you hold to that desire with a singleness of purpose. The woman in our text had a single-mindedness of purpose. It was her response that got Jesus's attention. Some preachers focus on the woman's faith, that saying that's what caused Jesus to heal her daughter. Even the header in the Bibles say this passage about this is about the Syrophoenician woman's faith. But that's not what the text is about. People probably focus on the faith because they're using a patriarchal lens that would not allow them to admit, or maybe they really couldn't see, that a woman was smart enough to go toe to toe with Jesus. That's why it's so important for us to read for ourselves, because faith is not even what the text itself says it's about. If you look at the text, after she gave that response to Jesus, the text says, he said to her, for saying that, you may go. The demon has left your daughter. She didn't say, I have faith in you. She didn't say, because I believe in you, my daughter will be healed. She just came back and said, even the dogs under the table deserve the crumbs. You know, we need to be able to look at things with a clear lens and find out what the truth is. Because the truth is, it may have been a mix of faith and desperation that led this woman to Jesus. But it was not her faith, but it was the use of her God-given ability to think and to be persistent that led to the healing. She won that argument. There was nothing else Jesus could say in response. But he was big enough to accept the fact that he lost. He lost graciously. He didn't have any animosity for his opponent. As a matter of fact, it was Jesus who was transformed in the interaction. The woman's response brought Jesus back to himself. In spite of his weariness, he was able to come back to her and say, now your daughter is healed. Faith is a powerful characteristic to have, but we live in a time when we need more than faith. We need faith and boldness if we want things to change. When women's rights are being rolled back to the time of back alley abortions, and when voting rights are being rolled back, you know, if some people had their way, people of color would have to go back to passing the jelly bean test just to vote. And when our environment is changing so much that we're having tornadoes in new places and stronger storms, we need to have faith and boldness enough to speak truth to power and do the work that can save our world. I'm glad today that we have an opportunity every day to come back to ourselves. We have the opportunity to get and keep ourselves centered and connected to our source. When we're secure and sure of the God that is within and around us, we can bring our best self to the cause of a healthy, loving, equitable, and just society. I'm reminded of the words to that old song by the Isley Brothers that was also covered by Aaliyah. And that song said, at your best, you are loved. You are a positive, motivating force within my life. My friends, that's what we need to be. That's who we are when we're being our best self. And like the woman in our text, we can be our best selves and be bold and be persistent and stand and work for what is right. Thank you for listening.